Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
We're them.
We're them. We're they.
The actual one. We're not
Jesus
body doubles.
Christ.
Or voice doubles.
You're Ben Matlock. I
still remember the first time I got recognized in. Oh yeah, right. That would be a fucking nightmare.
Yeah. I told that story, right, where like that guy at the grocery store like checked my ID because I was like buying beer or something, and like he found out my name was the same name as that main character from Matlock, and he got like really excited. And he was,
oh god, so that's like you're basically describing that scene from Office Space with
kind of, because like I've never watched that show, so I know like he was like that was a verbatim lie. He was like looking at the ID and like, my god, your name's Ben Matlock. And I'm like, yeah. He's like the show? I'm like, I guess. Then like every time I went into that store, because it was like the closest grocery store to where I worked at the time, every time I went in there, he would start singing the theme song. And I didn't know the theme song, so I had no idea what he was doing. And I got really scared. Because he would like jump into other cashiers' lines to be like, bah, 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 and like whatever the fucking, however the song went. And I was just like, okay, all right.
Is he having a stroke? Like, should we call someone?
I'm like, I need to shop somewhere else now, apparently. Thank God there's a Safeway right across the street. But
oh man, sounds like you had a pretty easy date lined up if you wanted it. But
or fucking, I've been watching a lot of that Hannibal show lately, so probably my mind immediately goes to serial killing. Oh shit.
Well, yeah, but honestly, there's a lot of overlap between the dating world and the serial killing world. Like,
I wouldn't know. So
I know. I'm saying that like I'm an authority on it. I dated one person for a very short time, and then I started dating Tara and married her. So
Then you found Tara. I was like, okay, two people. They're not serial killers.
What are the chances
I better lock this up, and while I still have my head on my shoulders.
So 9 short years later, we got engaged. But anyway. I'm loving that mental image though. The guy and he probably thought he was like giving you the like ribbing of a lifetime. Like I'm teasing, and it's like
he loved the show, and I think he was just genuinely stoked that there was somebody actually named Ben Matlock out there. Which to this day, my mom still swears that she did not name me after the show. She didn't but I think that's bullshit. I think she knew, and I think she liked the name Ben. But I also think she knew it would come back to bite me one day, and that's how it did. It was like one fucking really, really diehard Matlock fan working in a grocery store nearby. Would just like start singing the song aggressively at me.
I mean, that's basically, like I said, the scene from Office Space. I don't know if you've seen that movie or not, but...
same idea.
Although yours is better. I mean, that's yours. I think tops the Office Space one. But
he was a nice guy, but it was definitely uncomfortable. And you just it's that thing like people who have listened to the show enough know how fucking antisocial we are. So it's just that thing. It's just like, yeah, could you ring up my fucking shit, please? Like I don't want to be sung to right now. Like, I just worked 9 hours at a fucking store that's closing. I would like to fucking go home, please. I'm not a fucking old lawyer who loves liver and onions, and that's all I know about that show.
Yeah, was this guy, like, an older guy, or...?
He wasn't that old. That was what was kind of crazy to me. You know, maybe, like, 40s, maybe 50s? But, like...
So he would have... It sounds like the age that he would have grown up on... Matlock like reruns and not, it wasn't
like some that like, you stayed home sick or something, then maybe that was what was on, but
so it'd be like me running into a guy that's named Fraser Crane. Like
that would be awesome. I would be I mean I don't know anything about Fraser, but Fraser Crane's a great name. I respect it.
So what did you ever do with those tossed salad and scrambled egg? And then you get punched in the face because, I mean, you're pretty lucky if that's only happened once. Like,
hey, you, what'd you do? Like,
we used to have a client, and we might still, I don't know, because it wasn't my location, it's the other one, named Lisa Simpson, and that had to suck.
I mean, Simpson, you're kind of fucked anyway.
Yeah. So, anyway, that's what this show's about. It's about names and the fun that you can have with them.
We do have fun with names on this show, usually because we can't say them.
Oh, just wait.
But yeah, if you've never listened to the Non-Essential podcast before, we tell each other stories, and they can be about whatever.
Yeah.
Because
truth, fiction,
because we're not
whatever.
Professional enough to adhere to a strict format. So,
I like to think it was the only way that we could ensure that people with ADHD like us. I shouldn't say that because that's making light of it. Neither of us are actually diagnosed with that, but I do have a very short attention span, at least.
Yeah. Well, I do.
So it's a way to keep me in the game. Like, if we focus on one thing too long, I'd just be like,
yeah,
I don't care.
Well, I think like we kind of had a Seinfeld moment when we were coming up with this show, because I think initially like that we were talking about it being more structured. And then, like, as the more we talked about it, it became that thing of like, well, what if we made a show about nothing?
And it was like the perfect format for like expanding the nothingness over time too, because we did kind of start out doing the same like kind of history type topics and stuff, and then it's like, that's hard. Let's just throw in some creepypasta here, some we even did that one episode that I did where it was like a game show type esque, like, guess if this thing's the true thing or the false thing. That was
a fun one.
Yeah. But it's also kind of the ultimate, like, I have no idea what I'm doing moment.
I don't know. I think once I said, like, I'm going to just read verbatim from the internet and fucking trash on it. I think that was the point. That was the kind of the turning point of this show of like, okay, they really don't give a shit. They're just they're just amusing themselves.
I joked on Twitter earlier today because I thought this might be the moment where I'm like too lazy to even look up a pre-written story to read, and I was like, man, this might be 30 minutes of just this shit, like just talking out your ass, trying to fill airtime. But I did find a topic, and I think it's a pretty good one. So,
all right.
So we're lucky. We're fortunate.
We are blessed.
So Jeanne de Clisson was born in the year 1300. She was born into a wealthy French family. And at the age of 12, the ripe old age of 12, she was married to a fellow wealthy person named Geoffrey de Chateaubriand, which I think is also like a cheese or a wine or
sounds
both.
like a Chef Boyardee knockoff.
Trying to sound more like classy than Chef Boyardee, but you're actually sounding more like Save-A-Lot brand. They had 2 kids, and then he died at the age of 26. So Jeanne would have been about 19. You probably don't want to do the math on that about when they originally got married. Although there's not really a good age for the groom to be when the bride's 12. So whatever. I guess it could have been worse for the time.
Yeah, still. I think even back then it's like, really, huh?
Yeah, and in fact, some of the stuff I read was talking about, because it was normal to get married off pretty young, but not 12 was, even for the time, was kind of, people were like, huh.
I don't, it's kind of weird to think about, is like, because I feel like there's something natural in humans to be like, okay, she's fucking 12. Or
right.
Like there'd be a part of you that like, that feels weird.
You would think so, although there is certainly a segment of society that thinks that it doesn't feel weird.
Unless it's like, unless in
there's
their
a lot
mind,
of men and women tracking those people down.
Unless in their mind it was like, kind of more like the idea of like arranged marriage, and marriage was more about status. But I don't know what the fuck you would get out of like, hey, shocking, I don't understand pedophilia. I guess is what I'm trying to say here.
Just say, well, and that's the thing. Part of it is that it was very much a arranged marriage, and for that time. But they had their first kid when she was 14, so there was also that. Like, it's like, yeah, this is more about joining families and gaining assets, but they're still being gross. Anyway, her husband died. She soon remarried to a wealthy Frenchman named Guy Pientevray. He's the one that I can't really pronounce.
That sounded like you tried to sneeze to cover up the pronunciation.
Fairness, I think that's exactly how you do it. Like her first marriage, this was an arrangement of convenience, which is code for, just it had to do with money, not anything else. Unfortunately for Jeanne, being married to Guy was too convenient. He was a much sought-after son-in-law, and the wealthier Deblois family, I think it's Deblois, already had their eye on him as a suitor for their daughter, who I have no idea what her name or age was. Through the Deblois' strong ties to the Pope, they managed to have Jeanne's marriage suddenly and unceremoniously annulled, and convinced Guy to marry their daughter instead. So, like, she had already married the guy. I think they were married for, 2 years. But this other family's like, no. He needs to be with our daughter. Pope, void that marriage. And he was like, cool. That's one of my powers. I'll do it.
I'd kind of like to have, speed dial access to the Pope. I don't know. I wouldn't get anything. I don't have any... He couldn't do anything for me, but I think it would be
Sure, cool. He could. Imagine you could win every fucking argument in your life because somebody's arguing with you and you're like, oh yeah, well, let's ask the Pope.
That is true. Conservatives and shit run so much of our society and economy that I could probably be well, you know what? You could pass that policy, but I'm going to bring up the Pope right now and we'll see what he has to say.
Yeah.
I'm going to go way over your head. I'm going right to the guy who talks to God. You fuck.
Right. I'd walk into the Capitol building and be like, yeah, I'm running this place. And people would be like, no, you don't. Be like,
Pope
oh yeah, here's the Pope. He's right on the line. You want to talk to him? They'd be like, well, fuck.
You're going to argue with the Pope? Which has to suck. It's probably getting in an argument with not like a mean grandparent, but the one who's really passive aggressive, and you just can't get a word in edgewise. Right.
If that's what you think God would want, and you're like,
yeah, and it's no, but hear me out, and it's well, you no, you just you got to do what you think is best, but I really think you should reconsider, and it's just that for 2 hours. Until you're like, fuck, I reconsidered, you win.
And then you're like, fuck, I just cussed at the Pope. Fuck, I did it again. Fuck. Oh, no. And you just...
all right, fuck you. You're getting what you want. But I get to cuss.
So anyway, these people called up the Pope and were like, yeah, annul this marriage. And he was like, sure, you're good guys. And he did. Which sucked cool. for... Yeah. Which had to suck for Jeanne. But it sucked more for Guy because he would suddenly and mysteriously die before the wedding to the Deblois girl took place. And I can't confirm this, but I do have a hot piece of juicy gossip. It's said that Guy's untimely and mysterious death may have been at the hands of the spurned Jeanne. To my knowledge, there's no actual historical proof or evidence, and she was never outright accused of murdering him. But if that was the case, it would make sense. It certainly foreshadows what's about to come next. So Jeanne remarried for a third time.
Ever after, in peace.
After. Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's a very short story I brought this week, but I just really liked the names.
We needed a feel-good after I bitched for 40 minutes yesterday about life. So here's the story of a girl who had a good time.
So she remarried a third time, this time to a Breton noble named Olivier de Clisson. It was during this time that the 100 Years' War started, which I think we're all pretty familiar with, but just to recap, that came about after the death of the Duke of Breton, it's probably pronounced Britain, who had no male heir, which left the territory up for grabs. which was kind of a very common theme for the time back then. So both King Philip VI of France and England's King Edward III wanted to claim Brittany, which that threw me off too. Like, I knew all this, but not well enough to not be confused by it. A Breton was from Brittany, which was different from Britain because that was England. It's all back when that was still very fragmented territories, kingdoms. So Jeanne's husband, Olivier, fought with the French to defend Brittany from the English. Of course, that doesn't particularly mean that he wanted France to take Brittany either, but he probably saw that England was the bigger immediate threat. So basically, they're living in this small kingdom kind of between France and England. And
you gotta go with somebody.
Right. Because like I said, the Duke died with no heir, so now everybody's trying to claim.
It'd be great if her husband was just like, I want it. Yeah.
That's basically what's going on at the time. But Olivier wasn't the guy that was like, it's mine, but he was still like, I'm a Breton and I'm going to defend, I don't want the English coming in here, of course. Who wants that? So he fought with the French. Eventually, word was sent that France and England had signed a treaty to officially halt France's push just halt the fight over the territory. And Olivier was invited to France to participate in the celebration, since that's who he was, sided with. And it would be feasts and, games. Like it was exactly like a tournament of champions like you picture in the movies with like jousting, that kind of stuff. And they're like, yeah, we're going to have this big party because there's a treaty. We'd like you to come be our guests because you helped us fight this war. Which sounds great.
A Knight's Tale where like they joust and stuff, and Queen plays all the time, even though it's like centuries before Queen would be a band.
But they had Queens, festival. So it tracks.
They had exactly. Queens, but did they have Freddie Mercury? Frederick Mercury, as he went by.
Sir Frederick of Mercury.
Sir Frederick of the planet Mercury.
Mercury. So anyway, they're throwing this big party to celebrate, and they invited him. But if this whole tale was Star Wars, here's where Akbar would have shouted, "It's a trap!" Some within the French rulership had begun suspecting that Olivier had switched sides and was now aiding the English.
So they fucked him up.
It was 1343. King Philip, on the advice of military advisor Charles de Blois, had Olivier captured and tried for treason. After a hasty and questionable even for the time trial, Olivier was executed and then beheaded, and then his head was placed on a pike outside of the castle at Bouffay.
I mean, if you look at France's history, there's a lot of interesting things, but one constant through a lot of early France is they loved fucking lopping a head off. Mm-hmm. They got good at it.
But it does seem like an awfully big coincidence that the man who convinced Philip VI to execute Jeanne's husband was none other than Charles de Blois, the same de Blois who had a very lucrative arranged marriage thwarted by the sudden and mysterious death of the groom. So did de Blois suspect Jeanne had murdered Guy, and this was his revenge for that, perhaps? Because there was really no evidence that Olivier had sided with the English, had switched sides. Like I say, even for the time, we've covered trials and stuff back then, and they were very like, he's blonde and his eyes are blue, so he's guilty because it's Tuesday, that kind of thing. But even for that time, a lot of people are like, whoa, that seems
I'm sure hasty, it's just a small world. It's just a coincidence.
But there was a lot of other historical drama that came into play, and I tried to sum this up because it gets confusing and dry. But so the French-backed Charles de Blois family, or de Blois clan, whatever the fuck they were, had been in a bitter territory dispute with the English-backed Montfort family. Jeanne's own family, like her parents and cousins and whatever, sided with the de Blois claim to the land that was in question. I don't know where this land was. But Olivier and Jeanne herself supported the other family, the Montforts. So they were, it would make for awkward family gatherings because... But at the time, that's all this ever was. There was all these kingdoms, people would die, and then everybody would squabble over who was entitled to it. But so basically there's that. There's a territory dispute that, Olivier was on the other side of the de Blois. So there's that as well. And then though Olivier had fought alongside de Blois himself, Charles de Blois, against the English, it's said that de Blois grew suspicious of Olivier after he had been captured in battle by the English, but they demanded an unusually small sum for Olivier's release. So that's one of the stories. That seems more like the excuse that Olivier gave for, I think that was his, here's our evidence, let's murder him, which wasn't really evidence of anything. But like I said, regardless of the motive, Olivier's death angered a lot of people, both in Brittany and in France, even though he was put to death by the King of France. But that's, like I said, this gets really confusing because you've got France fighting England for Brittany, and Brittany kind of defending itself and also fighting France and England. But even within these countries, you have the King of France, but there's always factions inside France that don't want Philip as king. So there's infighting too. I mean, it's just like everybody's fucking trying to kill everybody because they all want control of everything. So that's all you really need to know. And I think a lot of people out there watch Game of Thrones. It's that, just without dragons and ice zombies or whatever. But a lot of people, the point is, there's a lot of people unhappy with the king's decision to execute Olivier. Like I said, there was no evidence, and the desecration of his body, you talked about how they liked lopping people's heads off, but at the time anyway, that was something that they really only did to low level, low people from the lower class, thieves and shit. They didn't tend to do that to noblemen people.
They'll wrap it up.
But at the time, that was seen as extremely disrespectful, regardless of if you thought he was guilty or not. So a lot of people were mad. And then there was Jeanne. Unlike the first two marriages Jeanne had, Jeanne and Olivier actually were in love. It wasn't, it was, advantageous marriage because they both came from wealthy families, but they married out of love, not, some territory deal. So when her husband was betrayed and murdered, Jeanne did what any lovely, grieving bride would do. At the age of 43, she swore vengeance against King Philip and Charles de Blois, which I'm sure they were quaking in their... Yeah, I'm sure they were quaking in their boats.
Sort of story building here.
I'm picturing these, one's the king of France and the other's this pompous military guy that just got his enemy executed, and the wife's like, I'll get you, and I'm sure they're like, ho, ho, ho. What are you going to do, woman? Well, what she did, she immediately sold all the family's properties and used the money to raise a small army and acquire 3 warships from England. The ships were painted black and red sails were hung from their masts. The ships became known as the Black Fleet, which is a pretty fucking kick-ass name for a fleet of revenge-seeking murder ships.
If you've always had this in you, why wouldn't you do it immediately?
Well, that's actually what leads people to kind of wonder if she did kill that second husband, Jeanne, whatever. Because here's the point in the story where it becomes very clear that she is a very vengeful woman and not bashful about, she's not timid. She immediately set her sights on the castle Tuffeau, which was loyal to de Blois. It seems like she was pissed at the king because he's the one that had her husband executed, but she was more pissed at de Blois because there was some back history there, and she knew he was the one responsible for convincing the king to have her. I think de Blois was her real enemy. And this castle was just, a family that was loyal to him, and she's like, yep, that's where we're going first. After a short siege, Jeanne and her men were able to overtake the castle, where they slaughtered everyone except one single survivor who they left to deliver the message to King Philip and Charles de Blois that the widow Jeanne de Clisson was coming for them. Which, again, is pretty badass until you really think about the fact that they murdered a whole bunch of people who were largely innocent, except for they just happened to be friends with the wrong person.
Yeah, but that's war,
still, exactly. For the time, for a war, for a revenge story, that's pretty badass.
If you're gonna be a fucking vengeful nightmare fucking person, then build up a hell army, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So they basically wiped this castle off the map, except for the one person. They're like, make sure you deliver this message. And then he probably got there and it's like, some woman killed my whole village and castle, and I can't remember her name. I was too busy pissing
this is like
my
the
tunic.
Fucking early lore of a Dark Souls boss. It was like...
So Jeanne, along with her 2 sons, took to the seas and waged war against any and all French ships she could find. Basically became a pirate, but it wasn't about the money per se. It was just literally about, fuck you, France. I'm going to do everything I can to destroy you. We've talked a lot about pirates.
There is no France anymore. So.
Right. So we've talked a lot about pirates and how they operate. Often the ships they conquered would be taken into the fleet, and anyone who would swear allegiance to their new captain, or that's putting it like in a romantic, like looking back, high seas novel sense, it was really anybody that they could intimidate into slavery, basically, would be kept on as crew. Jeanne didn't do that. Instead, she continued to do the castle thing. After capturing a ship, she slaughtered everybody except for 1 or 2 people. And the survivors were only allowed to live so that they could report back to the king, letting him know exactly who had taken out his ship. Of course, the widow Jeanne, who quickly became better known as the Lioness of Brittany, which is also a pretty cool name to have when you're just going around slaughtering people. So the Lioness led the Black Fleet in a hugely successful campaign against the French for 13 years, which is an eternity for a pirate. We've talked a lot about that, too. Even some of the more successful pirates, the ones like Blackbeards and stuff, you read about them and you find out that they operated in terror for 3 years and then were killed in battle or whatever. She managed to keep it going for 13 years. During this time, the opportunity arose to ally with England, where she would launder the captured ships to the English to help aid her fight against France. Again, it wasn't that she particularly, cared to align with England, mind you. She just fucking hated France. Her aid helped the English basically eliminate French access to the English Channel altogether. It sounds like by the end of this 13 years, they had really swung the dominance at sea in England's favor, and she played a pretty good part in that. And that was even after King Philip's death. Jeanne continued to wage war, against France. Pirates' days are always numbered, however, and Jeanne's were no different. Except for it was very different because unlike the vast majority of these tales, she retired. So in 1356, she married an English nobleman who had led campaigns against the same Charles de Blois that Jeanne had sworn revenge against, which I'm sure was a big, attracting factor to her.
I imagine her crew was just like that group that follows Forrest Gump running across the entire fucking country, and then her being like, yeah, I'm pretty tired. What the fuck? I thought we were taking down France.
Well,
nice
my guess
Dick.
is
you got bored.
This is an army that she purchased, so they were probably, like I said, she'd slaughtered crews.
They probably wanted
but
money.
They were in it for the plunder. Yeah, and it sounds like it was pretty good plunder. So they probably were pretty disappointed when she was like, yeah, it's time to call it a wrap, boys. The thing to me, it's funny, there's a lot of themes. It's always kind of cool to come across a badass woman of history because they do get overlooked. We've talked a lot about that.
Well, to be fair, fucking pirate. A lot of collateral damage there. So
I'm not saying she was a good person per se.
Yeah.
But like I said, we idolize people like Blackbeard and all them, and in fairness, she is a relatively well-known pirate. I wouldn't have been shocked if you tell me that you've come across her story before. But
I've heard the name. I never read her story.
Yeah. But the really interesting thing to me, because women still deal with this shit today. She didn't become a pirate and go on this campaign of bloodthirsty and very successful murderous vengeance until she was 43. And so she was 56 at the age she retired. So you had this 56-year-old woman just sailing around killing
To be
Frenchmen.
fair, with like, age inflation, if I hit like 80, I'll probably do the same thing. Because it's like, well, fuck, there's a lot less in front of me than behind me, so just see what happens. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those stories where like it's rare where a pirate can be like, all right, I'm good, and I'm out.
Yeah.
But
and
that
she
was
met
like
another
Redbeard that I talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Like they were the ones that were smart enough to be like, yeah, I've had enough piracy.
So to
like,
be fair, it sounds like she got fucking remarried and shit and kind of settled down. Redbeard's like, well, I got my own fucking country basically now. So
yeah.
I'm good.
But I mean, yeah. But her marriage, she married some dude that was wealthy and retired to his castle and lived a relatively quiet. It didn't sound like she lived much longer. It didn't give me an age of death, but it just said that she died,
has to be
minorly
kind of terrifying to like marry a fucking woman who basically declared naval war against an entire country on her own.
On her own, on a 3-ship army that she's just like, fuck it, I'm selling everything and we're going to kill.
Yeah.
But that's the most terrifying kind of enemy to have. Like this is your classic story about be careful who you fuck over, because if you leave somebody that's got nothing left to lose, that's the most dangerous enemy to like.
I mean, it was original. It was kind of the OG version of declaring bankruptcy, was selling all your shit and jumping into high seas crime.
Yeah, except she wasn't particularly forced to. She's just like, fuck. It's like, yeah, you pissed me off, I'm coming for you. But like I said, she retired and lived in this castle, eventually died. It's not really recorded as what. So she still would have died at a relatively early age. It was before the age of 60 did. At least. So. Yeah. But kind of the thing that's interesting is she murdered all these people for 13 years. She wasn't the one that had a hand in King Philip's death. I think he was murdered. I didn't get into that history of it. Most kings at the time, it was very like, you could equate it to piracy, because most kings did not live out a nice life of retirement either. You either got like murdered young, died in battle, or you got to the point where you're feeble enough that somebody's like, hey, I can kill this dude and take his stuff. Like, you generally met kind of, violent ends, although I don't know for sure that was the case with Philip. But regardless, he died during her terror campaign, and it had nothing to do with her. But then the one that Charles de Blois, that she really hated, she also never managed to kill him, and he outlived her, although he did die in battle in the year 1363. So that's why, like I said, I didn't find a death date for Jeanne, but it had to be before 1363, because I did get read, that she died before he did. She would never live to see his death. Yeah. But that guy would also go on to be later named a saint, so that probably would have pissed her off.
Yeah, well, hey, you were the one who made yourself a pirate. You kind of laid out that dichotomy for the history books yourself when you. Yeah.
Though in fairness, I still think Jeanne wins, because going down in history as the bloodthirsty, like, revenge-seeking... Yeah, the Lioness of Brittany, who led the Black Fleet on a campaign of terror, is way the fuck cooler than being, like, some backstabbing military guy who became a saint that nobody's heard of. Like, her legacy is way cooler.
Yeah, but of course in the sense of, like but praise Big Blow, or whatever the fuck his name was.
Yeah, and that means that he goes down in history as a good guy. He was a saint, even though he was just as responsible for murdering countless thousands of people as she was. Yeah. Like we've talked about just about every time we hit on these topics, neither of these people is actually a hero. Well, it
was all about who you knew. That's what we talked about again, going back to the Redbeard thing, was like, Redbeard did all the fucking evil shit a pirate ever did, but he never got that, like, he was never hung for it, because he was, like, in the fucking Ottoman Empire's pocket.
He landed in a position, in a place and time, and a geography and history where he stayed alive and became the ruler, or seen as a good guy to his people. Like, clearly, it's a very, very cliche but extremely true. History is written by the victor thing, where he was the victor.
Yeah, it's all about connections, who you know, what you're doing for them, what you can keep doing for them. And most pirates who survived or were able to get out were able to navigate that sort of social, political structure. The ones who didn't, and usually are the ones we know the best because they're the ones who went out in a big blaze of glory, those were the guys who actually could not, like, maintain a good relationship with anyone to save their lives.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly, she managed to, and this still does require some navigation, because this is what happened to her husband Olivier, is he aligned with the right side. It's not like he joined up with France and France lost and he lost his life that way, but they turned on him. She managed to end up in England, and had she lived longer, there's a chance that, like, she got tried by, maybe they turned on her, but she didn't. Or something, yeah. But,
I mean, because all it would have taken there, and it wouldn't have happened because early England and France were constantly in each other's shit. But, like, one well-timed fucking treaty where it's like, okay, we're going to stop fighting for now, but it would, one of the terms of that could have been like, hey, you got to do something about this fucking pirate who keeps taking our shit.
Because that kind of stuff got written into treaties all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, that's one of the things, and of course, here's the non-fun disclaimer, is like any of these characters in history, a lot of her story is exaggerated over time. I left out, but, like, it was said that she would personally, like, delight in beheading her captive, French sailors with a big axe, because, the poetic part there, why that came into her story is because that was the fate of her husband. So of course, the tale becomes, well, now she turned around and that was her revenge on the French. She probably didn't do that. But there is enough she is a real person. That is an established historical fact. And one of the things that exists in history to tell us that is she was mentioned in a treaty at one point. It wasn't you got to hang her, if we sign this treaty, but she was enough of a person. Like, she was important enough that, like, in a treaty between countries, that they're like, oh, by the way, like, stop working with this person. Or whatever. I don't know exactly how she was
life goal is to be mentioned in a treaty.
In a treaty.
It's like, hey, you got to stop.
Between two countries.
You got to stop letting them put up a non-essential podcast,
right? But it's got to be between two countries that you're not aiding. It's not like I'm leading the Continental United Army and they want, like, my surrender. It's got to be like Argentina and Paraguay are fighting, or Uruguay or whatever, are fighting,
and are part of about this fucking guy.
Yeah,
we got to put our hostilities aside and agree this is the real problem.
That's how you know you've made it. Like, but anyway, that's her story. I thought it was pretty cool. Like, it's not too common that somebody decides to just go on a vengeant warpath on their own. Like I said, eventually she kind of allied with England out of, like, convenience, but England didn't support her initial war. It wasn't like she's like, fuck it, I'm defecting to England and, you're going to give me an army, because they would have never given some woman from Brittany an army anyway. She's just like, mercenary time. I'm hiring mercenaries and we're going to do this thing. And she did successfully. That was a part that was pretty amazing to me. Like I said, life expectancy once you start waging war at sea tends to be relatively short.
Not me. I'd live forever.
The 100-year, the 100 Years' War. One of the reasons why it's taught in history classes and we all ignore it because I don't know shit about it other than what I read for this topic. But if you consider that, she lasted over 10% of this 100 Years' War on her own, just, like, waging her own little war, like, as not a country, just as a pissed off person. So, yeah, that's something.
So, yeah.
Like I said,
good for you.
It really is a testament, though. Like I said, and that's what just because I was curious and I never had last year, beginning of this year, I read through the Art of War. Sun Tzu, I think is how you pronounce it, his Art of War, which I kind of hate saying because that's one of those things that a lot of douchebag, like, alpha male whatevers identify with. But that was one of the tenets in it. It's like, yeah, be careful of an enemy whose back's against their wall and has nothing to lose, because those are the ones that you don't want to fight. I mean, they literally have nothing to lose. Now, I guess technically she had her lands to lose, but I think she also was probably pretty... Yeah, so well, but that's what I mean. Like, yeah. She gave up what she had and then had nothing to lose. But if you think about it, too, like I said, she waged war against France, which is obviously still a country. England was on the other side of her. They're obviously still a country. The one that is not still a country is Brittany. So she probably understood, too, if she tried to just be like, yeah, I'm going to just retire to my lands. Like, she was going to be swallowed up in this war anyway. So she really didn't have anything to lose. And she was smart to sell it and buy an army one. Yeah. You know, some people buy sports cars. She bought
I mean, fuck, if I could buy
force.
Fucking pirate fleet, I would do it.
Yeah, except for I kind of do have this personal moral thing against murder.
I'm not saying we would be good pirates. You know, I want,
well, that's the thing. You could be like the most like...
Then I would be like, it would all fucking
imagine
crumble,
having a mercenary force... A mercenary force of raiders and pirates that just like pied people in the face. You don't kill them. You don't take their stuff.
The reality is,
Rans.
Like, here's the thing. Like, nothing would get that far if you were a threat. It wouldn't get that far if you were just a fucking clown pirate. It wouldn't get that far because you would just start setting sail. Some fucking crab fisherman would be like, hey, I think I see some pirates. And then they would bomb the shit out of you. So,
yeah, that's the problem.
You can't have any fun anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking of raiding a town and like literally it's just like pie in the facing everybody. Like the version of a complete slaughter that doesn't actually kill anybody. But you're right, like the police would show up and pull out their guns. Yeah.
The fucking ocean police.
Well,
that ocean episode of Cops.
Like I said raiding a town, so you'd be on land. I guess you could like escape to your sailboats, but
I'm saying it wouldn't even get that far. As soon as you're like on a ship with a fucking black flag or something, like,
yes, true.
First thing is a fucking torpedo going right up your ass. Like,
the Black Fleet. So that's my story.
All right.
Pirates and Vengeance. It was right up my alley.
Yeah. Copyright
and
Steve.
A bunch of...
You heard it here first. It's his story.
A bunch of French names that I can't... actually, I think most of them were relatively easy. Except for that guy, Piantevere.
That's my name. That's how you pronounce my name in France.
And I'm sure... I think I was pronouncing Deblois wrong. It's probably Deblois. It's silent S on the end, but whatever. Deblois.
Deblois for the blow.
Big blow.
Which was named for cocaine.
Yeah, that's how they came. Like I said, they were an extremely wealthy family. Where do you think they got their wealth from?
A
cocaine.
Bump of Deblois. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna go do.
Well, watch out because
a good solid week of
the Lioness of Brittany's coming after you.
And then we'll be back next week when I'm all fucked up on Deblois.
Make for a good show.
No, it wouldn't. All I would talk, it's like my story today is about cocaine and why we should do more cocaine.
It's so great. Have you ever tried cocaine? You should try cocaine. I tried cocaine.
Man, I understand investing so much better now that I'm on cocaine.
Dogecoin or whatever. I don't know how it's pronounced. They keep pronouncing it Dogecoin on the sports talk radio, and I don't trust that.
I think it's Doge, but I've been calling it Doggy Coin because there's a doggy.
Yeah, that's what. Right, that's kind of where I thought it came from, was that original meme where it was a dog but spelled D-O-G-E. So I just call it dog coin or doggy coin.
Called pup bucks.
You'll have to figure it out because you'll be all cocaine and bit.
I won't need to say. I won't need to know the names of any of this shit. I'll just be like, sell, just sell. You know, that's.
And then the last 20 minutes will just be like you sniff it. You won't hear.
It'll just be me with like a bloody nose, Odin in the corner, as like I lose everything. That's my economic plan. Where's yours? So, anyway, we're done here.
Yeah, we're done. Get out.
Get out. Go.
You've worn out your welcome,
Fine.
Listeners. That's how we That's how we treat you around here.
That is how we treat them. We've gotten really mean to our listeners now. And that
Stop listening
and
to
that
me.
ain't changing because I have a Coke problem. So
Not yet. You have a Coke problem on the way.
I have one brewing. I'm getting pre-addicted as we speak.
As soon as we're done recording, I expect to see you tweet out. So, where does one go about getting a cocaine?
How do I get I would like a little baggie of cocaine. What is a first timer's recommended ounce to get good and addicted to this? If you know that, email me. We'll be back next week.
Drug addiction. There's no funnier topic than that.